Tonight, the bitter face-off between hockey's fiercest rivals.
Let's get ready for an epic battle.
The Canada-US clash.
The kid scores!
And the president's power play off the ice.
Who would think that it was an American president bringing Canada together like this, eh?
USA all the way today.
What prompted this advice from a former key member of Donald Trump's inner circle?
Canadians should take that as the greatest compliment you've ever had.
Travel nightmare.
We've been completely kept in the dark.
The enormously expensive alternative for stranded Sunwing passengers. Plus, a spine-tingling moment for a young kayaker.
I'm out of here.
And neighborly love that knows no borders.
Real Americans love you guys.
The unbreakable bond between two countries that is enduring even in choppy political waters.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. No other sport brings this country together as much as hockey. And tonight the stakes are extremely high in the fiery final of the Four Nations face-off currently underway in Boston between Canada and the U.S.
He finds McKinnon on the move. McKinnon scores!
Nova Scotia native Nathan McKinnon scored first to make it 1-0 before Team USA tied it up. The historic and dramatic clash taking place at a time when Canadian pride is soaring in the face of Donald Trump's tariff threats. Now listen closely at how one Canadian took a stand inside that Boston arena.
True patriot love that only us command.
That's Winnipeg's Chantal Kreviatsuk singing "O Canada." Her publicist confirming tonight she changed the lyric "In All of Us Command" to "That Only Us Command" because of Trump's threats to make Canada the 51st state. Let's bring in CTV's Paul Hollingsworth, who is outside the arena in Boston, where that game is taking place. The score, by the way, is 2-2. And Paul, I just want to pull up this post by the U.S. president before the game, where he said again that Canada will, quote, someday become a very important 51st state and that he couldn't attend in person, but will be watching, and invited the Prime Minister, whom he again called Governor Trudeau, to do the same. What are fans there telling you about this battle on and off the ice?
Well, Omar, off the ice leading into this game, nervous anticipation for a country filled with fans who take their self-esteem really and tie it to victories in international hockey. That's not a surprise. But with the themes we just touched on with that post by President Donald Trump, if he was looking to stir it up and get a reaction, mission accomplished. It was the talk about feature on the streets of Boston leading into this game. We spoke to numerous fans who were upset by the post, not happy about it, and many of them used it to rile themselves up and get into the moment to cheer for their team even louder than they would have otherwise. Here's some reaction from the streets of Boston before tonight's game.
This is bringing the country together, including Quebec, which I think is phenomenal. Me being, born and bred from Quebec as well, I love seeing the unity in Canada, and who would think that it was an American president bringing Canada together like this, eh?
Those tweets just fuel the fire for Canada, I think, especially the players in the locker room. They're going to see something like that from Trump coming out, and they're going to say, okay, you know what, this is not happening. We're still the best Canadian hockey players in the world. We're the best country in the world. We're going to do this for our country, and we're all feeling it.
Omar, a lot of these fans not even being playful with their emotions, some of them just really angry about what's been happening across the border between both countries. One fan today told me that he doesn't hate the Americans, doesn't hate the country. He looks forward to visiting again. But if booing the anthem and cheering against his team is what makes him feel better in a pushback moment, he's willing to do that because he's that unhappy with what's been happening off the ice leading into this game between Canada and the U.S. Omar?
Strong sentiments, and that score, by the way, still 2-2. Paul Hollingsworth tracking the game and fan reaction in Boston tonight. Paul, thanks. To the game of politics now, and a man who used to be a key member of Donald Trump's inner circle, Steve Bannon, who suggested today that Canada should be grateful for a presidential proposal many in this country feel is an insult. He spoke to CTV's Judy Trinh.
At America's biggest conservative convention, White House advisors wield props and power. On the sidelines, it's mega influencers who hold court. Among them, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, who says Canadians should be flattered that the U.S. president wants to annex Canada.
The Canadians should take that as the greatest compliment you've ever had.
Bannon says Trump sees the Arctic as the site of the next great power struggle. He says Russia and China may want to take control of the Arctic's valuable resources by force, and that Canada doesn't have the military might to defend the North.
If you think you can actually secure the Arctic to the degree you need to secure it against the Chinese Communist Party and the Russians, and still have the rest of your defense budget and still make your commitments to NATO, you have not run the math.
Canada plans to spend nearly $40 billion to improve Arctic surveillance. For nearly 70 years, Canada and the U.S. have worked together to protect North American aerospace. This former top soldier says the partnership is working.
Let's strengthen NORAD to strengthen surveillance and defense of the Canadian and American North together in partnership, as we always have before. Why would we have to become the 51st state to do that?
Bannon was pardoned by the president after being convicted of contempt of Congress. He says there's no stopping the tariffs and that Trump wants to take control of Canada while he's president.
There's a lot of us right now trying to figure out the capability and possibility of him running for re-election in 28, whether the Constitution really prohibits it or not. But I think right now we have to work on the working theory that there's 4 years.
On Friday, at least 2 Canadian premiers will return to Washington, this time to meet with state governors. Last week, all 13 premiers were in D.C. to meet with officials at the White House. They wanted to use a charm offensive to stave off tariffs, but the effort fell flat. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. The federal government took another security step today with the hopes of staving off Trump's tariffs. Ottawa has listed 7 criminal organizations, including cartels and street gangs, known for trafficking fentanyl as terrorists, a demand by Donald Trump, and part of the $1.3 billion plan to secure the Canada-U.S. border. Late tonight, the Israeli military is claiming one of the bodies released by Hamas does not belong to any of the hostages. The militant group displayed 4 coffins and handed over what it said were remains of 4 Israelis, including the youngest hostages, Ariel and Kfir Bibas. But the IDF says forensic testing found the body of their mother, Shiri, was not returned as promised. There was no immediate reaction from Hamas. And 3 buses burst into flames near Tel Aviv today in what police are calling a suspected terror attack. No one was injured in the explosions. The war in Ukraine and the war of words between the U.S. and Ukrainian presidents continues tonight. Donald Trump launching new attacks on Volodymyr Zelensky, accusing him of scamming the U.S. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin.
A warm meeting between U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, discussing security guarantees for Ukraine and the return of prisoners in a possible peace deal, giving the wartime leader hope. But the press conference was abruptly canceled at the request of Washington over the growing rift between President Donald Trump and Zelensky. Trump blaming Ukraine for Russia's invasion, calling Zelensky a dictator. Trump's top aide defending his boss.
Who does he think is more responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin or Zelensky?
Well, look, his goal, Peter, is to bring this war to an end, period. And there has been ongoing fighting on both sides. Some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable.
And it didn't help when Zelensky accused Trump of falling for Russian disinformation. British tabloid headlines labeling the feud. Trump declares war on Zelensky, but Trump isn't backing down.
It's also time to find out what happened with all the money, because he made the statement that half of it he doesn't know where it is.
Launching new attacks on Zelensky, accusing him of scamming Washington for billions of dollars. Trump's upset Ukraine rejected a deal that would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. Payback, says the Trump administration, still pushing for that deal.
There are tremendous resources there. Not only is that long-term security for Ukraine, not only do we help them grow the pie with investments, but we do have an obligation to the American taxpayer.
As Russia continues to attack them, Ukrainians are feeling abandoned by the U.S. president, an extraordinary about-face in U.S. policy. Canada and European leaders offering support, including Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who will be here in Washington next week. Omar?
All right, Joy, thanks. Canada is opening its doors to thousands of Sudanese refugees fleeing from what's being called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The federal government is committing to resettling 4,700 refugees by the end of 2026. Following outcry, it is also reopening applications for the Permanent Residence Pathway program it created for close family members of Sudanese Canadians. The community has criticized the program for its small scope, long processing times, and steep financial criteria. Just days before 5 Liberal leadership candidates debate each other, one of them is fielding questions on foreign interference in her campaign. Ruby Dalla posted on X, as a person of color herself, she will, quote, not allow every person of color to be painted with the brush of foreign interference. Dalla was responding to a report in the Globe and Mail that said she was questioned by her party about possible interference from India. And a surprise announcement this afternoon from the Premier of Prince Edward Island.
I would be stepping down as the Premier and the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Prince Edward Island effective noon tomorrow.
Dennis King says he struggled with the decision to leave politics, but that it's in the best interest of his family, the government, and the people of PEI. He also admitted that the threat of U.S. tariffs on Canadians also influenced his decision to step down, and that it's, quote, not going to be easy times. King became Premier in 2019 and was re-elected with a majority in 2023. The province's Education Minister, Rob Lance, has been named the new Premier and interim PC leader. A subsea fiber optic cable connecting Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador has been cut for the second time in less than a year. Now the RCMP and Bell Canada, which owns the cable, and CTV are investigating. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin reports on the impact.
Video obtained by CTV News shows the work done to repair the damage. This to a crucial 3-centimeter wide cable that was sliced.
What we find on the cut is not something that's torn, but an actual clean cut. It looks like it was cut by some sort of tool.
This severed the 140-kilometer network path that provides internet, TV, wireless, long-distance voice, and emergency services to Newfoundland. Bell, the company which owns CTV News, rerouted services, and there was no impact, but it put the system at risk.
We do have the RCMP engaged so that they could, conduct a full investigation and get to the bottom of it for us.
Cutting these cables is no easy work. They're protected by coils of thick wire, but there have been other incidents internationally too. A day after the latest Cabot Strait cut, a cable was severed in the Baltic Sea, one in a string of suspected sabotage in recent years. In January, NATO launched Operation Baltic Sentry, dispatching warships, drones, and aircraft to protect critical cables from any threat. Suspicion has centered on Russian ships.
We are the CCTVs of the Baltic Sea region, and we hope to deter anybody who might be inclined to cause unlawful action or damage.
Bell says it's up to the RCMP to determine who or why the cable in the Cabot Strait was damaged. But there are possibilities other than international sabotage.
One good hypothesis would be that an anchor got caught in it. And as you're trying to bring up your anchor, because you're moving on, the anchor's stuck on this cable, and then you need to free your anchor of this cable. And maybe people don't understand that it's such an important cable.
So Bell is spreading the word. For now, a specialized repair ship using a rover has fixed the damage and buried the cable further into the sand. Bell is exploring surveillance options to see if it can warn off ships that come too close to the critical infrastructure. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Frustration is growing as flights in and out of the country's busiest airport are still being hit after this week's terrifying crash on a Toronto tarmac. CTV's Heather Wright on the ongoing travel chaos.
A week in paradise, now a travel nightmare.
Sunwing won't tell us anything. We've been completely kept in the dark.
Piper McDonald was supposed to fly home from Mexico on Monday. She's among the many stranded down south after Sunwing canceled dozens of flights.
I get so much of it is out of Sunwing's control regarding the weather and the crash of Pearson, but enough is enough.
After 4 days of trying to get home on a Sunwing plane, McDonald says she had no choice but to find her own way back.
We've finally come to the point of having to pay almost $2,500 just to purchase a flight with Flair.
It's not clear how many Sunwing passengers are stranded, but to get them home as quickly as they can, the airline announced yesterday it was canceling a number of southbound flights to free up planes and crew. This difficult but essential operational decision allows us to redirect our resources toward bringing delayed customers home as quickly and safely as possible. That decision, though, has left people like Alash Igli packed for a vacation that isn't going to happen.
We got an email and it just said your trip's canceled altogether.
Pearson is operating at 95% capacity, so it's interesting to see Sunwing do this. At the same time, there were smaller airlines that got limited airplanes to get people back.
Sunwing is not the only airline to have canceled or delayed flights following Monday's plane crash. Last night, the fuselage of Delta Flight 4819 was removed from the runway, the first step in getting 2 runways reopened, another factor that has impacted delays. And today, the airline confirmed that all 21 passengers from that flight that were taken to hospital have been released.
Delta has offered every passenger $30,000 US, no strings attached, though lawyers say the first crash-related lawsuit was filed today. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. Coming up.
Just what a lively kid she was.
A mother speaks out about the agony of losing her daughter, plus the condition that has shockingly sidelined a young NBA superstar. A 15-year-old boy is now facing first-degree murder charges in relation to a quadruple homicide on a Saskatchewan First Nation. The teenager, who cannot be identified, was scheduled to appear in a Regina court today. 18-year-old Darius Reset was also arrested for killing 2 women and 2 men at a home on Carry the Kettle, Nakota Nation on February 4th. Police say the home was targeted but have not provided a possible motive. An Alberta mother is speaking out for the first time since a 5-car pileup on Boxing Day killed her young daughter. She spoke to CTV's Kathy Lee and shared what's helping her heal.
Returning to this park, a step towards healing for Amanda Reitmeyer and her 12-year-old daughter Madison. They were here with family 2 days before being sideswiped in their car at a major Calgary intersection on Boxing Day.
I was knocked unconscious. So Madison's scream still plays in my head quite often, because that's what I woke up to.
Madison also had injuries, and Reitmeyer would learn that her other daughter, 9-year-old Victoria, didn't make it.
Just what a lively kid she was. And how much she loved life.
Victoria, her mom, and sister were part of a 5-car pileup. Police arrested 30-year-old Dwayne Napus, who they say allegedly robbed a pharmacy, assaulted the pharmacist, and then stole a van. He sped through the streets, eventually running a red light before crashing into the other vehicles. Napus faces multiple charges, including dangerous driving causing death. As the court case moves forward, Reitmeyer's focus is on recovery.
I see what I can push each day, and each day is a new day.
Her resilience bolstered by support from people countrywide and her family.
Victoria is my strength. Madison is my strength. I get through every day because of those two and my husband.
And while it will take time for Reitmeyer and her family to heal from the unbearable loss, spaces like this will forever hold the special memories and love of her little girl. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
Still ahead. The terror of being stalked by a great white shark. A young NBA superstar season is over after just 46 games. 21-year-old Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs has been diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis, a form of blood clot in his right shoulder. The condition has both sidelined and ended some players' NBA careers. There's no timeline for his return to the court.
If we don't do this, there will be nothing left to say.
Longtime James Bond producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli say they're stepping back and handing over creative control of the franchise to Amazon MGM. The pair will remain part of a joint venture that owns the intellectual property rights for the iconic spy character. Amazon has suggested it has plans to expand James Bond beyond the beloved original novels and movie adaptations.
Great white, great white, great white shark. I'm out of here.
And a frightening moment for a 19-year-old kayaker who came face to face with a great white shark while fishing off the coast of New Zealand. Fortunately, he escaped unharmed. Still ahead, rolling out the red and white carpet, how a U.S. border town is pulling out all the stops to welcome vital visitors from Canada. The Maple Leaf made a splash along a section of the southern border today, but it wasn't the Canadians who were behind it. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson on a heartwarming cross-border camaraderie.
It's a crowd that appears proudly Canadian. They're covered in red and white. They're waving the maple leaf. But this is Washington State, and these are Americans who want their northern neighbors to know this.
Real Americans love you guys.
Close to 200 of them lined the ferry terminal in Port Angeles, Washington today, waiting for the first ferry of the year from Victoria, BC.
We're for Canada, and we're not for all the animosity that our administration's trying to put between the two countries. And you guys are our closest friends and allies, and we couldn't do it without you.
Canada's our neighbor, and you don't treat neighbors that way. And all of us are really upset about that.
They are referring to the treatment from Trump. The president's tariff threat has led to calls for Canadians to boycott American products and travel. Bad news for border towns like this one.
A lot of small businesses are going to be going out of business, and we're going to have vacant storefronts, and we don't want to see that.
The Canadian dip, also fueled by the low dollar, has already begun. New numbers from Washington State show southbound traffic at BC border crossings in February is down between 20 and 40%.
We understand those strong feelings exist, and we hope that, this is just a chaotic moment that is going to pass.
With limited ability to affect decisions at a federal level, this town is doing what it can to let these Canadian visitors know they're valued, a message that left many moved.
It's so heartwarming, and I just appreciate all these people taking the time. It's very emotional.
Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Port Angeles, Washington.
That's so great to see. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather will be here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and have a great few days ahead.